One night to give him an heir. One night, and then she could walk away with enough money to save her mother's life. That was the deal Sofia Martinez signed with trembling hands in the cold marble lobby of the Blackwell Tower. One night with Alessandro Blackwell, the ruthless CEO who needed a child but refused the complications of marriage or emotional attachment. She would give him what he wanted, take the payment, and disappear into her ordinary life. But when Alessandro touched her in the darkness of his penthouse bedroom, when he whispered her name like a sacred prayer, when he felt her inexperienced body tremble beneath his hands and realized what she had never told him, everything changed. The man who had built an empire on cold calculations found himself undone by something he thought didn't exist: genuine, soul-shattering connection. And the woman who agreed to one night found herself caught in arms that refused to let her go. If you want to discover how a business transaction transformed into an obsession that neither of them could escape, subscribe to the channel now. Leave a like if you believe some connections are too powerful to walk away from, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to this story. Your presence here makes all the difference. The October wind cut through the streets of Chicago like a blade, sharp and merciless, carrying with it the scent of coming winter and distant lake water. Sofia Martinez stood outside the Blackwell Tower, her thin coat doing nothing against the cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. She clutched her worn purse against her chest, the envelope inside feeling heavier than it should, the contract that would change everything. At 24, she should have been living the life she'd dreamed of, perhaps traveling, building a career, falling in love with someone kind. Instead, she was here, about to sell the most intimate part of herself to a stranger because her mother's medical bills had grown into a mountain she couldn't climb any other way. Stage 4 cancer didn't wait for better options. It didn't care that Sofia worked 2 jobs and still couldn't make the numbers work. It just kept growing, kept stealing her mother away day by day, and the experimental treatment that might save her cost more than Sofia could earn in 5 years. The lobby of Blackwell Tower was everything she wasn't. Sleek, expensive, cold. The marble floors reflected the crystal chandeliers above, creating an infinity of light that made her feel small and out of place. Men in suits that cost more than her monthly rent moved through the space like sharks in expensive fabric, barely glancing at her as she stood frozen near the entrance. A woman in a perfect black dress approached, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. "Miss Martinez?" Her voice was professional, distant. "Mr. Blackwell is expecting you. Top floor." Sofia's legs felt like water as she followed the woman to a private elevator, the kind that required a key card and probably cost more than most people's cars. The ascent was silent except for the soft hum of machinery, and with each floor that passed, Sofia felt her heart beat faster, harder, until she thought it might burst through her chest. The penthouse office was a study in power and isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Chicago that made the city look like a toy, like something small and manageable. The furniture was minimal, modern, expensive, everything in sharp lines and cold surfaces. And behind a massive desk of dark wood sat Alessandro Blackwell. Sofia had seen his picture in business magazines, on news websites, in the occasional gossip column that speculated about the mysterious billionaire who never dated, never attended social events, never let anyone close. But pictures hadn't prepared her for the reality of him. He was 38, but he carried his age like a weapon, all sharp edges and controlled power. His black hair was perfectly styled, his suit custom tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean, athletic build, but it was his eyes that made Sofia's breath catch, ice blue, intense. The kind of eyes that seemed to see through every defense, every pretense, straight into the core of who you were. He stood as she entered, and even that simple movement held a predatory grace that made something in Sofia's stomach clench with an emotion she couldn't name. "Miss Martinez." His voice was deep, smooth, with the kind of quiet authority that made people obey without question. "Thank you for coming." Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. Her fingers tightened around her purse. Please. Sit. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, and Sophia sank into it, grateful because she wasn't sure her legs would hold her much longer. Alessandro returned to his seat, his gaze never leaving her face. I assume you've read the contract. She had. Every word, multiple times, trying to find some hidden trap. Some clause that would make this even worse than it already was. But it had been surprisingly straightforward. One night. Intercourse with the intention of conception. Payment of $500,000 upon confirmation of pregnancy. No contact afterward. No claim to the child. No messy complications. Yes, she whispered. I've read it, and you understand the terms. Completely. Alessandro leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. Tell me why you need the money. It wasn't in the contract. This question. She could refuse to answer, but something in his gaze made her want to be honest, to have at least one moment of truth in this transaction built on clinical detachment. My mother Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She has cancer. Stage 4. There's an experimental treatment, but insurance won't cover it, and She swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened. I've tried everything else. This is the only option left. Something flickered in Alessandro's expression, too quick to name, but it was there. A crack in the ice. How old are you? 24. Have you done this before? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications she wasn't ready to face. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. No, she said quietly. Never. Alessandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropped lower, become somehow more intense. I need to be clear about something, Miss Martinez. This isn't a romantic arrangement. I don't do relationships. I don't do emotional entanglements. What I need is simple. An heir to inherit the Blackwell empire. Someone to carry on what I've built. I'm offering you a substantial sum, because this is a business transaction. Nothing more. I understand, Sophia said, though something in her chest ached at the coldness of his words. Alessandro pulled a pen from his desk, the movement precise and controlled. If you're certain, if you're absolutely sure this is what you want, then sign here. He pushed the contract across the desk toward her. Sophia stared at the document, at the line where her signature would go, at the promise of money that could save her mother's life. Her hand shook as she reached for the pen. She thought of her mother's face, growing thinner each day. She thought of the fear in her mother's eyes when the doctor delivered the latest prognosis. She thought of all the nights she'd spent crying, trying to figure out how to make impossible numbers work. And then, she signed. Alessandro watched her write her name, his expression unreadable. When she was done, he took the contract, glanced at it briefly, then looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Tonight, he said simply. Tonight. Sophia's voice came out higher than intended. I have a dinner meeting that will end around 9. Be here at 10. I'll have a car pick you up from wherever you're staying. The clinical nature of it, the scheduling like a business appointment, made something inside Sophia want to laugh or cry or both. She just nodded instead. Alessandro stood, signaling the meeting was over. One more thing, Miss Martinez. He walked around the desk, moving closer, and Sophia had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. When you're here tonight, leave your nervousness at the door. What we're doing may be a transaction, but I won't have you trembling in fear. If you can't handle this, we can end it now. Sophia stood on shaking legs, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I can handle it. We'll see. The dismissal was clear, but as Sophia turned to leave, Alessandro's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Martinez. She turned back. Your mother. What's her name? The question surprised her. Elena. Why? Alessandro's expression softened almost imperceptibly. No reason. I'll see you tonight. The ride down the elevator was a blur. Sophia barely remembered leaving the building, barely felt the October wind as it cut through her coat. She walked for blocks without direction, her mind spinning, trying to process what she'd just agreed to. $500,000. Enough to save her mother. Enough to give Elena Martinez a fighting chance at life. But the cost. Sophia pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to calm the churning there. She'd just agreed to sleep with a man she didn't know. To potentially carry his child. To give that child away like it meant nothing. The weight of it hit her all at once, and she had to lean against a building, gulping air, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. By the time she made it back to the tiny studio apartment she shared with her mother, Sophia had managed to compose herself into something resembling normal. Elena was sleeping, her frail body barely making a dent in the bed they shared, her breathing shallow and labored even in rest. Sophia sat beside her mother, gently brushing gray hair from her forehead. "I'm going to save you," she whispered. "I don't care what it costs." The hours until 10 p.m. passed like a strange dream. Sophia showered, standing under water as hot as she could stand, as if she could wash away the nervousness, the fear, the complicated knot of emotions she couldn't untangle. She dressed carefully in the only dress she owned that wasn't worn or faded, a simple navy blue sheath that her mother had bought her 2 years ago for a job interview. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, her brown eyes looked huge in her pale face, and the dress, while modest, couldn't quite hide the curves she usually tried to downplay. At exactly 9:45, her phone buzzed. A black town car waited downstairs. As promised, the driver was professional and silent, asking no questions as he navigated through Chicago's evening traffic toward the Blackwell Tower. The city lights blurred past the window, and Sophia watched them without really seeing, her mind 1,000 miles away. The penthouse was different at night. The floor-to-ceiling windows now reflected the city back on itself, creating an illusion of floating in a sea of lights. Soft illumination from hidden sources gave everything a dreamlike quality, softening the hard edges she'd noticed during the day. Alessandro stood by the windows, his back to her when she entered. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie, the first time she'd seen him in anything less than perfect formal attire. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. And somehow this small concession to informality made him seem more human and more dangerous at the same time. "You came," he said without turning around. His voice carried across the space between them, low and smooth. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Sophia found her voice, surprised it came out steady. Alessandro turned to face her, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her. His ice blue eyes traveled slowly from her face down to her feet and back up again, not leering, but assessing, appreciating. "That dress," he said quietly, "is perfect. Simple, elegant. You have excellent taste. It's the only one I have." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Alessandro's eyebrows rose slightly. "Then we'll have to remedy that. But not tonight. Tonight, you're perfect as you are." He moved toward her with that predatory grace she'd noticed earlier, and Sophia had to force herself not to step back. When he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin slightly, he reached out and gently took her hand. "You're trembling," he observed. "I told you not to be nervous." "I can't help it," Sophia admitted. "I've never." She stopped, heat flooding her cheeks. Alessandro's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Never what?" "Done this. Been with anyone." The silence that followed her admission was deafening. Sophia couldn't bring herself to look at his face, afraid of what she'd see there. Disgust? Anger that she hadn't disclosed this before? Instead, She felt his finger under her chin, lifting her face until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You're telling me you're a virgin?" It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Yes." Alessandro released her hand, turning away, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair in what seemed like an uncharacteristic moment of agitation. "Christ," he muttered. "Sophia, this changes things." "Why?" "The contract doesn't specify. I still meet the requirements." He whirled back to face her, and there was something new in his expression. Something intense and complicated. "Because I'm not a monster," he said roughly. "Because taking someone's virginity isn't something to be done as part of a business transaction. Because you deserve better than this." Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. "I don't have the luxury of deserving better, Mr. Blackwell. My mother is dying. This is the only option I have left. If you're backing out." She stopped as Alessandro closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that shocked her. "I'm not backing out," he said, his voice low and intense. "But the terms are changing. Tonight isn't happening." Sophia's stomach dropped. "But the contract, you need." "I need," Alessandro interrupted, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones in a gesture that seemed unconscious, "for you to understand what you're giving me. Your first time shouldn't be a transaction. It should be." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "It should mean something, but it does mean something," Sophia whispered, feeling tears sting her eyes. "It means my mother gets to live. It means everything to me." Alessandro's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching there. The conflict in his expression was clear, the cold businessman warring with something else, something more human. "Here's what's going to happen," he finally said, his voice firm, brooking no argument. "You're going to stay here tonight." In the guest room. "Tomorrow I'm transferring the full amount to your mother's medical fund. Not as payment for tonight, because nothing is happening tonight, but as an advance." Sophia's eyes widened. "I don't understand." "You will," Alessandro said cryptically. "But first tell me about your mother. Tell me about Elena." The request was so unexpected that Sophia didn't know how to respond. They stood there, his hands still cupping her face, the city lights glittering behind him like a universe of possibilities. "She's the strongest person I know," Sophia finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "She came to this country with nothing, raised me alone, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. She never complained, never asked for anything for herself. And now, she's dying, and I can't." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. "I can't lose her. She's all I have." Alessandro pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her in an embrace that felt nothing like a business transaction. One hand stroked her hair while she cried. The other held her steady, and he said nothing. Just let her break apart in the safety of his arms. When the tears finally subsided, Sophia pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, it's all right," Alessandro said gently. "Come. Let me show you where you'll sleep." The guest room was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soft grays and whites, with a bed that looked like it had been made for royalty. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what happens next." "But the contract," Sophia started. Alessandro's smile was small, almost sad. "Forget the contract, Sophia. This isn't business anymore." He turned to leave, but Sophia's voice stopped him. "Why are you being kind to me? You don't even know me." Alessandro looked back at her, and in his ice blue eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch, a loneliness that matched her own, a hunger for something real in a world of transactions. Maybe that's exactly why, he said quietly. Good night, Sophia. And then he was gone, leaving her alone in a room that cost more than she'd make in a year, her mind reeling, her heart pounding. Everything she thought she understood about this arrangement suddenly turned upside down. Sophia barely slept. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, and her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Alessandro's hands on her face, heard the gentleness in his voice when he'd held her while she cried. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be kind. He wasn't supposed to care. When morning light finally filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Sophia found a note slid under her door. Written in strong, decisive handwriting, it simply said, "Join me for breakfast when you're ready." The main living area was flooded with sunlight, transforming the cold space from last night into something warmer. Alessandro stood in the kitchen, which was all gleaming stainless steel and dark granite, doing something that seemed completely at odds with his billionaire CEO image. He was cooking. "Good morning," he said without turning around, somehow knowing she was there. "I hope you like omelets. I don't really know how to make anything else." Sophia found herself smiling despite everything. "You cook?" "Badly," Alessandro admitted, glancing over his shoulder with a small smile that transformed his entire face. "But I'm functional enough to keep from starving." He plated 2 omelets that actually looked decent, along with fresh fruit and coffee, and gestured for her to sit at the island. They ate in silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Alessandro set down his fork and looked at her directly. "I've been thinking about this all night, about what we're doing, what you need, what I need. And I've come to a conclusion." Sophia's stomach clenched. Here it comes, the moment he tells her he's changed his mind entirely. "I don't want one night with you," Alessandro said, his ice blue eyes locked on hers. "I want more than that." Sophia's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Alessandro leaned forward, his intensity palpable, "that I'm proposing a different arrangement. You move in here. We give this," he gestured between them, "a real chance. If pregnancy happens, it happens. But it won't be the result of one cold transaction. It will be the result of something genuine." Sophia felt like the world had tilted sideways. "You want me to move in with you? For how long?" Alessandro's jaw tightened slightly. "I don't know. A month. 3 months, however long it takes for us to figure out if this, whatever this is real or just chemistry. But I want you to understand something, Sophia. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm still the same man who doesn't do relationships, who keeps people at a distance. I'm offering you honesty and the chance to see if we can be more than a contract. And my mother's treatment?" "Already being handled," Alessandro said firmly. "I made the transfer at 6 this morning. Elena Martinez's medical bills are paid in full, including the experimental treatment. Regardless of what happens between us, that money is hers." Tears stung Sophia's eyes. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because," Alessandro's voice dropped lower, rougher. "When I touched you last night, when I held you while you cried, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Something I thought I'd buried so deep it couldn't resurface. And I want to explore it. I want to know what it is about you that makes me want to break every rule I've set for myself." Sophia's hands shook as she set down her coffee cup. "I don't know how to be what you need. You don't need to be anything except yourself," Alessandro said. "That's the point. No pretense. No performance. Just you and me, figuring this out together." The offer was tempting, terrifying, and completely insane. But when Sophia looked into Alessandro's eyes, she saw something there that called to her, a vulnerability he was trying to hide, a hope he was afraid to acknowledge. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll try." Alessandro's smile was slow, genuine, and it transformed him from intimidating billionaire into something dangerously close to irresistible. Good. Then let's start with the basics. Tell me about yourself. Real things, not what you'd put on a resume. So Sophia talked. She told him about growing up in a tiny apartment in the South Side, about her mother's stories of Mexico, about dreams of becoming a teacher that had been derailed by medical bills. She talked about her love of old movies and her terrible habit of singing off-key in the shower. And Alessandro listened. Really listened. Asking questions, laughing at her stories, slowly peeling back layers of formality until they were just two people sharing breakfast. Then it was his turn. Alessandro told her about growing up with a father who saw emotions as weakness, about building his empire from nothing after his father died, about the loneliness that came with success. He spoke about late nights in empty offices, about charity galas where he smiled for cameras while feeling nothing inside, about the realization that he'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow at the core. I thought having an heir would fix it, Alessandro admitted. I thought if I had someone to leave all this to, it would give everything meaning. But the truth is, I was just trying to fill a void with another transaction. The honesty in his words, the raw vulnerability, made Sophia's heart ache. You don't have to be alone, she said quietly. I know you've built walls, but they don't have to stay up forever. Alessandro reached across the island, his hand covering hers. With you, they already feel like they're crumbling. The days that followed had a dreamlike quality. Sophia called her mother from the penthouse, explaining carefully that an anonymous donor had paid for the treatment, that she'd taken a new job that required her to live on site. Alina had cried with relief and gratitude, not questioning too deeply, too overwhelmed by the gift of hope. Alessandro arranged for Sophia's few belongings to be moved to the penthouse. Not that she had much. When the boxes arrived, all three of them, Alessandro had looked surprised. This is everything? It's all I need, Sophia had replied, and something in his expression had softened. He cleared out half his closet for her clothes, which barely filled a quarter of the space. The next day, a stylist appeared with racks of clothing. This is too much, Sophia protested as the woman laid out designer dresses, casual wear, everything imaginable. Alessandro emerged from his home office, his expression firm. You're living in my world now. You need clothes that fit that world. This isn't about changing you, it's about making sure you're comfortable. The stylist worked magic, and within hours, Sophia had a wardrobe that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. When she tried on a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves, Alessandro had gone very still. That color, he said, his voice rough. It brings out the gold in your eyes. Keep it, wear it tonight. We're going to dinner. Sophia's stomach flipped. In public? Alessandro's smile was predatory. I want to show you my world. And I want that world to see you. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance, where celebrities dined in shadowed corners and waiters moved like ghosts. Alessandro kept his hand on the small of Sophia's back as they walked through the space, proprietary and protective at once. She felt eyes on them, felt the weight of speculation and judgment, but Alessandro seemed oblivious to it all, his attention focused entirely on her. You're nervous, he observed once they were seated. Everyone's staring, Sophia whispered. Let them, Alessandro said. You're beautiful. Let them wonder. The meal was exquisite, course after course of culinary art, but Sophia barely tasted any of it, too aware of Alessandro's gaze, too conscious of the way his leg occasionally brushed against hers under the table, too focused on the heat building between them with every passing moment. When they returned to the penthouse, the tension was palpable. Alessandro poured them each a glass of wine, and they stood by the windows, looking out at the city lights. I want to kiss you, Alessandro said suddenly, his voice low. But I need you to tell me that's what you want too. Sophia turned to face him, her heart pounding. I want that, she whispered. Alessandro set down his wineglass and cupped her face in his hands, the gesture already becoming familiar. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss would be. There was no awkwardness, no fumbling, just heat and hunger, and something that felt inevitable. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, as if he had all the time in the world to learn the taste of her mouth. Sophia felt her knees go weak, felt herself melting against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. Alessandro groaned against her lips, his arms tightening around her. "God, Sophia, what are you doing to me?" "I don't know," she gasped as his mouth moved to her neck, finding sensitive spots that made her shiver. "But don't stop." Alessandro pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged, his ice-blue eyes dark with desire. "Not yet," he said roughly. "When I have you, and I will have you. I want you ready. I want you sure." "But I am," Sophia protested, surprised by her own boldness. Alessandro's smile was pained. "You think you are, but you've never been touched by a man. You don't know what your body is capable of feeling. And when we finally come together, I want you desperate for it. I want you begging me." The promise in his words sent heat flooding through Sophia's entire body. So instead of taking her to bed, Alessandro spent the next week slowly driving her insane. He would kiss her until she couldn't breathe, then pull away. He would touch her, his hands skating over her curves through her clothes, learning her shape, but never going further. He would whisper against her ear all the things he wanted to do to her, painting vivid pictures that made her blush and ache. "You're torturing me," Sophia accused one night after a particularly intense makeout session on the couch. "I'm preparing you," Alessandro corrected, his voice rough with restrained desire. "I'm teaching your body to want. And God, it's killing me too. But when I finally have you, when I finally slide inside you, I want you so ready that there's no pain. Only pleasure." Sophia couldn't sleep that night. Her body felt alive in ways she'd never experienced, every nerve ending sensitized, every thought colored with desire. She could hear Alessandro moving around in his bedroom, could imagine him lying awake too, fighting the same battle. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings were spent over breakfast, talking about everything and nothing. Alessandro would leave for his office, but he'd call her during the day, sometimes just to hear her voice. Sophia explored the penthouse, discovering hidden corners and unexpected books. She cooked dinner, simple meals that made Alessandro smile and tease her about showing up his omelet skills. And every night, they would end up tangled together on the couch, pushing boundaries a little further each time. Alessandro taught her things about her own body she'd never known. He showed her that her neck was incredibly sensitive, that a certain touch on her inner wrist could make her gasp, that she loved having her hair pulled gently. He was patient, attentive, focused entirely on her responses. "You're so responsive," he murmured one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her collarbone. "Every touch makes you tremble." "Do you have any idea how intoxicating that is?" Sophia's mother called regularly, her voice growing stronger with each conversation as the treatment began to work. She wanted to meet Sophia's mysterious employer, to thank whoever had saved her life. "Not yet," Sophia kept saying. "Soon." The lie felt heavy on her tongue. What would her mother think if she knew the truth, that her daughter was living with a man, that this whole arrangement had started as something cold and transactional? It was Alessandro who finally addressed the elephant in the room. They were lying on the couch, Sophia's head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. She had been telling him about her mother's latest good news when he spoke. "She should come visit. Your mother. She should come here and see that you're happy." Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "You want to meet her?" "I want her to see that her daughter isn't suffering," Alessandro said. "I want her to know that you're cared for. The word love hovered unspoken between them, too big and frightening to name yet. But it was there in the way Alessandro looked at her, in the tenderness of his touch, in the smile he saved only for her. "Okay," Sophia said. "I'll invite her." Elena Martinez arrived on a Saturday, and Sophia had never been more nervous. Her mother stood in the penthouse lobby, her thin frame swimming in clothes that had once fit, her gray hair covered by a colorful scarf, her eyes taking in everything with wonder. "Mija," she breathed, pulling Sophia into a tight embrace. "You look so healthy. So happy." And then, Alessandro appeared, and Sophia held her breath, but her mother's reaction surprised her. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. "You," she said simply. "You're the one who saved my life." Alessandro's expression was unreadable. "I'm glad the treatment is working, Mrs. Martinez." Elena reached out and took his hand in both of hers. "No amount of thanks will ever be enough. But please, know that you've given my daughter the greatest gift." Her mother, Alessandro's throat worked. "It was my pleasure." Over lunch, which Alessandro had catered from an upscale Mexican restaurant in honor of Elena, Sophia watched the two most important people in her life interact. Alessandro was attentive to her mother, asking about her treatment, her history, her life. Elena, despite her weakened state, had that maternal intuition that saw everything. After the meal, she pulled Sophia aside while Alessandro took a phone call. "He loves you," Elena said simply. Sophia's eyes widened. "Mom, it's not like that. We're just..." "Mija," her mother interrupted gently. "I'm dying, but I'm not blind. That man looks at you like you're his entire world, and you look at him the same way." "But it's complicated," Sophia whispered. "It started as something else, something business." Elena cupped her daughter's face. "I don't care how it started. I care how it is now. And right now, I see two people who have found something rare. Don't let fear make you throw that away." When her mother left, pressed into a car service Alessandro had arranged to take her home safely, Sophia felt like something had shifted. Alessandro found her standing by the windows, staring out at the city. "What did your mother say to you?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "That you love me," Sophia said quietly. Alessandro went very still. "And what did you say?" "I didn't say anything." Sophia turned to face him. "Because I needed to hear it from you first." Alessandro's jaw clenched. "You know I'm not good at this. At feelings. At words. Then show me," Sophia challenged. Alessandro's response was to pull her into his arms and kiss her with a desperation that stole her breath. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I've never said those words to anyone," he admitted roughly. "I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of love you deserve. But what I feel for you, it terrifies me. It consumes me. From the moment you walked into my office, I haven't been able to think about anything else. That's love, Alessandro," Sophia whispered. "That terrifying, consuming feeling. That's exactly what it is." "I love you," Alessandro said, and his voice broke on the words. "God help me, I love you, and I don't know what to do with it." Sophia kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. "Then let me show you." That night, everything changed. Alessandro led her to his bedroom, to the massive bed she'd never entered before. The room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. "Are you sure?" Alessandro asked one last time, his hands framing her face. "Because once I have you, once I make you mine, I'm never letting you go." "I'm sure," Sophia whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." Alessandro undressed her slowly, reverently, his hands trembling slightly as he revealed her body inch by inch. When she stood before him completely bare, vulnerable in a way she'd never been with anyone. He just looked at her. "You're perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." Then it was Sophia's turn to undress him, her inexperienced hands fumbling with buttons and belt until Alessandro helped her, patient and gentle. When he stood before her, she couldn't help but stare. He was beautiful, all lean muscle and controlled power. Alessandro lifted her onto the bed, covering her body with his own. The weight of him, the heat, the smell of his skin, all of it overwhelmed her senses. He kissed her deeply, his hands exploring her body with a patience that made her writhe. "I've got you," Alessandro murmured against her lips. "I'm going to make this so good for you. Trust me." "I do," Sophia gasped as his mouth moved lower, finding sensitive places that made her cry out. When he finally settled between her thighs, his ice-blue eyes locked on hers. "This might hurt at first," he said, his voice strained with control. "But I promise. I'll make it good. Tell me to stop if you need to." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Alessandro kissed her as he slowly, carefully, pushed inside. There was pressure, a sharp moment of discomfort, and then he was there, completely connected to her in a way that made tears spring to her eyes. "Breathe," Alessandro coached, holding perfectly still despite the tension in his entire body. Just breathe through it. The discomfort faded, replaced by a feeling of fullness, of rightness. Sophia experimentally moved her hips, and Alessandro groaned. "God, Sophia." "You feel..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he began to move, slow and careful, watching her face for any sign of pain. But there was no pain, only pleasure that built with each movement, spiraling higher and higher until Sophia thought she might shatter from the intensity of it. Alessandro made love to her with a focus and intensity that left no doubt about his feelings. His hands were everywhere, learning her body, finding spots that made her gasp and arch beneath him. His mouth followed, tasting her skin, whispering words against her heated flesh that made her blush and burn. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with desire. "So perfect. Made for me." The pleasure built slowly, a tide rising within her that she didn't know how to control. Alessandro seemed to sense it, adjusting his rhythm, the angle of his hips, until suddenly Sophia felt something inside her shatter. She cried out his name, her body convulsing around him, pleasure washing through her in waves that seemed endless. Alessandro followed her over the edge moments later, his face buried in her neck, her name a prayer on his lips. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts pounding, skin slick with sweat. Alessandro held her close, pressing kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Did I hurt you?" Sophia could barely form words. "That was..." She paused, searching for something adequate. "I had no idea it could be like that." Alessandro's smile was satisfied, possessive. "That was just the beginning. We have all night." And he meant it. Over the hours that followed, Alessandro took her again and again, each time different, each time pushing her to new heights of pleasure. He was patient and thorough, teaching her body things she'd never imagined, showing her that intimacy could be playful and intense, tender and raw. By the time dawn broke through the windows, Sophia was exhausted and exhilarated, her body marked by his touch, her heart completely his. She lay in Alessandro's arms, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "What are you thinking?" Alessandro asked, his voice rough from use. "That I never want to leave this bed," Sophia admitted. "That I want to stay here with you forever." Alessandro's arms tightened around her. "Then stay. Move into this room. Sleep beside me every night. Wake up in my arms every morning." Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Alessandro said, echoing her words from earlier. "You're mine now, Sophia, and I don't share." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, but instead it sent a thrill through her entire body. "I'm yours," she agreed. Always. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Sophia officially moved into Alessandro's bedroom, her things mingling with his in a way that felt natural and right. They fell into new rhythms, sleeping tangled together, waking to make love in the soft morning light. Alessandro took her to work events, introducing her not as an employee or arrangement, but as Sophia, his tone making it clear she was important, that she mattered. The business world speculated endlessly. Alessandro Blackwell, the man who never dated, suddenly appeared everywhere with the same woman. Gossip columns ran photos of them leaving restaurants, attending charity galas, walking through Central Park hand in hand. The headlines varied from curiosity to judgment, but Alessandro ignored all of it. "Let them talk," he said when Sophia expressed concern. "Their opinions don't matter." Sophia's mother continued to improve, the treatment working better than anyone had hoped. Elena's doctor called it a miracle. But Sophia knew the truth. The miracle was Alessandro, his money, his willingness to save a stranger's life. One evening, about 6 weeks after their first night together, Sophia felt nauseous. She dismissed it as bad sushi from lunch. But when the nausea persisted for 3 days, Alessandro insisted she see a doctor. The penthouse doctor, who Alessandro kept on retainer for emergencies, examined her thoroughly. When he emerged from the bedroom where Sophia waited, his expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Blackwell," the doctor said. "Congratulations. Miss Martinez is pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia, who had followed the doctor out, went pale. "But we've been careful. Most of the time." The doctor coughed discreetly. "These things happen. Based on the symptoms and timeline, I'd estimate about 6 weeks along." The doctor left shortly after, promising to send over prenatal vitamin recommendations and names of excellent obstetricians. Alessandro and Sophia stood in the living room, staring at each other. "I'm pregnant," Sophia whispered, the reality of it hitting her. "We're having a baby." Alessandro crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands cupping her face. "Yes," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "We are." Sophia searched his expression for any sign of regret, of anger, of the cold businessman who had originally proposed this arrangement. But all she saw was wonder and something that looked like joy. "Are you happy?" she asked tentatively. "Happy?" Alessandro pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "Sophia, I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy. More than I knew I could be." Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. "I love you." "I love you too," Alessandro said, kissing her gently. "Both of you." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Sophia was sick for weeks, barely able to keep food down. Alessandro was attentive to the point of being overbearing, hovering anxiously, calling doctors at the slightest concern. She finally had to sit him down and explain that pregnancy, while uncomfortable, wasn't a crisis requiring constant medical intervention. "I just need you," she told him. "Not a team of specialists. Just you." Alessandro relaxed slightly after that, though he still treated her like she was made of glass. He attended every doctor's appointment, his hand gripping hers as they watched the ultrasound screen, seeing the tiny fluttering heartbeat that was their child. "That's our baby," Alessandro said, his voice full of awe. "That's our daughter or son." When Sophia's stomach began to show, Alessandro couldn't keep his hands off her. He was constantly touching her belly, talking to the baby, marveling at the changes in her body. "You're so beautiful like this," he would say, kissing her rounded stomach. "Growing our child, carrying our future." Sophia had never felt more loved, more cherished. But as the pregnancy progressed, old fears began to surface. What if she wasn't a good mother? What if Alessandro eventually regretted tying himself to her? What if the baby changed everything between them? Alessandro found her crying in the nursery they'd begun to set up, surrounded by paint samples and furniture catalogs. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "What if I can't do this?" Sophia sobbed. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if you realize you made a mistake?" Alessandro pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You're going to be an amazing mother. You're kind and patient and strong. Our child is lucky to have you, and as for me realizing I made a mistake," he tilted her face up to look at him. "Sophia, marrying you was the best decision I ever made." "No, wait. I haven't asked yet." Before Sophia could process his words, Alessandro was on one knee in the middle of the half-finished nursery. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Sophia Martinez," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "You came into my life when I thought I had everything figured out. You showed me I knew nothing. You taught me that love isn't a weakness, it's the greatest strength. You're having my child, but more importantly, you've given me a reason to be a better man. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and our family?" "Yes," Sophia whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Alessandro slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her with such tenderness that fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "We're getting married," he said against her lips. "We're having a baby. We're building a life." "I know." Sophia laughed through her tears. "It's terrifying and perfect. Just like us." They were married a month later in a small, intimate ceremony. Sophia's mother was there, healthy enough to attend, crying tears of joy. Alessandro's few close friends came, looking shocked but pleased to see him so happy. Sophia wore a simple white dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Alessandro couldn't take his eyes off her. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered as they stood at the altar. "I love you," Sophia whispered back. "Forever." Their daughter was born on a cold January morning. After 12 hours of labor, during which Alessandro held Sophia's hand and refused to leave her side, Isabella Elena Blackwell entered the world screaming her displeasure at 6 pounds, 7 ounces. Alessandro cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as the nurses placed the baby on Sophia's chest. "She's perfect," he breathed, his finger gently stroking his daughter's tiny hand. "She's ours." Sophia looked up at her husband, at the man who had started as a cold transaction and become her entire world. She thought about that rainy day in his office, about signing a contract she'd thought would be the hardest thing she'd ever do. And she smiled. "Best decision I ever made," she said. Alessandro kissed her forehead, then Isabella's. "Mine too. The best decision of my life." The first months with Isabella were a blur of sleepless nights and infinite tenderness. Alessandro, who had built an empire through ruthless business decisions, was brought to his knees by a tiny 7-pound baby. He would hold her for hours, just watching her sleep, his ice blue eyes soft with an emotion he'd never known existed. "I didn't know I could feel this much," he admitted one night, Isabella asleep on his bare chest, her tiny fist clutching his finger. "I didn't know my heart could expand like this." Sophia watched them from the doorway, her own heart so full it hurt. "That's what love does. It makes room for more." Alessandro looked up at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "I love you both so much it terrifies me. What if something happens? What if I can't protect you?" "Nothing's going to happen," Sophia said, moving to sit beside them. "We're safe. We're together. That's all that matters. But Alessandro's fears weren't entirely unfounded. Being married to one of Chicago's most powerful men came with complications. There were photographers who tried to catch glimpses of the baby, security concerns that required constant vigilance, social obligations that Sophia found exhausting. One evening at yet another charity gala, Sophia overheard women talking in the bathroom. "Did you see her dress?" One said, her voice dripping with disdain. "So provincial, she's clearly overwhelmed by this world." "I heard she was a nurse before she trapped him with a pregnancy," another added. Alessandro could have had anyone, and he chose that. Sophia stood frozen in the stall, her heart pounding, old insecurities rushing back. She'd known people thought these things, but hearing them said aloud made it real, made it hurt. When she emerged, the women went silent, their faces flushing with embarrassment. Sophia held her head high as she washed her hands and left, but the words followed her. That night, back at the penthouse, Alessandro noticed her unusual quietness. "What's wrong?" he asked, loosening his tie. The gala couldn't have been that bad. Sophia debated telling him, not wanting to burden him with her insecurities. But they'd promised each other honesty. Some women at the event, she began carefully, they said things about how I don't belong in your world. About how I trapped you. Alessandro's expression went cold, dangerous. "Who?" "It doesn't matter," Sophia said quickly. "They're probably right anyway. I don't know how to navigate your world. I make mistakes." Alessandro crossed to her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Look at me," he commanded. When she did, his eyes were blazing. "You are my wife, the mother of my child. You belong anywhere I am because I choose you. Those women, whoever they are, they're jealous and small. Their opinions mean nothing. But maybe they have a point," Sophia whispered. "You could have had anyone, someone who knew this world, who could be the perfect society wife." "I don't want perfect," Alessandro said fiercely. "I don't want someone who knows how to play society games. I want you, real, honest, beautiful you. Don't let their poison make you doubt what we have." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still that girl outside your tower, looking up at something I can never reach." Alessandro pulled her against him. "You're not outside anymore. You're at the center of everything. You're my home." The incident made Alessandro more protective, more public in his affection. At the next social event, when they arrived, he kept his arm around Sophia's waist, introduced her to everyone with obvious pride, and made it clear through every gesture and word that she was the most important person in the room. When Sophia overheard similar whispers, Alessandro appeared at her side as if summoned. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. "I believe you were discussing my wife." The group went silent, faces pale. "Let me be very clear," Alessandro continued. "Sophia is the best thing that ever happened to me. She's intelligent, compassionate, and stronger than anyone in this room. If anyone has a problem with my choice of wife, they're welcome to take it up with me directly. But I warn you, I don't take kindly to anyone disrespecting what's mine." The message was received. Word spread quickly that insulting Sophia Blackwell was a guaranteed way to make an enemy of one of Chicago's most powerful men. The gossip didn't stop entirely, but it became more cautious, more hidden. As Isabella grew, the penthouse filled with toys and laughter. Sophia watched Alessandro transform from cold CEO to devoted father. He would rush home from meetings to give Isabella her bath, would read her stories in different voices that made Sophia laugh, would pace the floor for hours when she was sick, refusing to let anyone else comfort her. "You're spoiling her," Sophia teased one evening, watching Alessandro carefully select the perfect stuffed animal from Isabella's overflowing collection. "She's 6 months old. She doesn't even understand yet." "I'm making up for lost time," Alessandro said, "making sure she knows she's loved. Every single day." Sophia's heart squeezed. "You're going to be that dad, aren't you? The one who can't say no." Alessandro grinned, unrepentant. Absolutely. Elena visited often, her health stable thanks to the treatment that continued to work. She would hold her granddaughter for hours, tears in her eyes, grateful for time she'd thought she'd never have. "You gave me this," she told Alessandro during one visit. "This time with my daughter and granddaughter. I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You gave me Sofia," Alessandro replied simply. "We're even." When Isabella was 8 months old, Alessandro came home early one day, his expression serious. Sofia, who was playing on the floor with the baby, looked up in concern. "What's wrong?" "I need to tell you something," Alessandro said, sitting beside them. "The original contract, the one you signed, I never destroyed it." Sofia's stomach dropped. "Why not?" "Because I was afraid," Alessandro admitted. "Afraid that if things fell apart, I'd need legal protection. But I don't want it anymore. I don't want any reminder that what we have started as a transaction." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, the original contract inside. "I want you to destroy it. Or keep it. Whatever you need. But I need you to know that I don't see you as an agreement anymore. I never really did." Sofia took the envelope with shaking hands. She remembered signing this document, remembered the fear and desperation, remembered thinking it was the end of one life and the beginning of something cold and transactional. She walked to the fireplace and, without hesitation, threw the contract into the flames. They watched it burn together, the pages curling and blackening, the words that had brought them together turning to ash. "It's gone," Sofia said. "And I'm glad. Because what we have now is real. It's ours, and it has nothing to do with that contract." Alessandro kissed her, soft and sweet, while Isabella babbled happily between them. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Alessandro scaled back his work hours, delegating more, refusing to miss important moments with his family. Sofia went back to school part-time, finishing her teaching degree because Alessandro insisted she shouldn't give up her dreams. They bought a house outside the city, a place with a yard where Isabella could play, though they kept the penthouse for nights when they didn't want to leave Chicago. On their first wedding anniversary, Alessandro arranged for Elena to babysit and took Sofia back to the small cafe in Soho where they'd first met. The owner recognized them immediately, smiling broadly as he seated them at the same corner table. "I knew it," the old man said. "I knew when I saw you two that first day. Something special." Sofia looked around the cafe, remembering the rain, the cold, the desperation that had driven her here. And then she looked at Alessandro, at the man who had become her husband, her partner, the father of her child. "A year ago I was sitting here thinking my life was over," she said. "And instead, it was just beginning." Alessandro reached across the table, taking her hand. "I was sitting here thinking I had everything figured out, thinking I didn't need anyone. And then you walked in, soaking wet and beautiful, and proved me wrong about everything." They ordered the same drinks they'd had that first day, coffee that had grown cold while they talked and discovered each other. But this time, there was no nervousness, no uncertainty, just comfort and love and the easy intimacy of two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every day. When they returned home, Elena handed Isabella over with a knowing smile. She was perfect, just like her parents. After Elena left, Alessandro and Sofia put Isabella to bed together, a nightly ritual they both cherished. Alessandro sang softly in Italian, lullabies his mother had sung to him before she died, before his father turned cold and distant. Sofia watched him with their daughter, marveling at how far they'd both come. Later, in their bedroom, Alessandro pulled Sofia into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For everything. For walking into my office that day. For signing a contract you shouldn't have had to sign. For giving me a chance to be more than the cold bastard I thought I had to be. For loving me even when I didn't know how to love you back." Sofia pulled back to look at him. "You've always known how to love me. You just needed permission to admit it." Alessandro kissed her, slow and deep, with the kind of passion that had never faded despite the demands of parenthood and daily life. "I love you," he said against her lips. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Sophia replied. Forever, they made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the heat of desire that hadn't dimmed. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first terrifying meeting to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been a path neither of them could have predicted. The second year of their marriage brought new challenges and joys. Isabella began to walk, her first steps taken between her parents in their living room, both of them crying and laughing as she toddled forward. Alessandro was there for every milestone, refusing to let work keep him from watching his daughter grow. Sophia's teaching degree was completed, and she began working part-time at a school in a lower-income neighborhood. Alessandro had offered to fund a private school where she could work, but Sophia had refused. "I want to work where I'm needed," she'd explained. "Where I can make a real difference." Alessandro understood, even admired her for it. Though he insisted on providing security given the neighborhood, they compromised. Discreet protection that didn't interfere with her work. The children in Sophia's class adored her, and she would come home with stories that made Alessandro smile. She was making a difference, just as she'd always wanted. But not everything was perfect. Alessandro's father's business partners, old men who had built empires alongside the senior Blackwell, began to question Alessandro's priorities. "You're going soft," one said at a board meeting. "Too focused on family, not enough on expansion." Alessandro's response was calm but firm. "My family is my priority. If that's a problem, you're welcome to sell your shares." The man backed down, but the message was clear. Not everyone approved of the changes in Alessandro. One evening, Sophia found him on the terrace, staring out at the city with a drink in his hand. "What's wrong?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Alessandro sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm failing. Not at being a husband or father. I know I'm good at that. But at business, at being the ruthless CEO everyone expects." "You're not failing," Sophia said firmly. "You're evolving. You're building something better than what your father built. An empire with a heart. But what if it's not enough?" Alessandro turned to face her. "What if the company suffers because I'm not willing to make the hard, cold decisions anymore?" "Then we adapt," Sophia said. "We find a way to be successful without sacrificing who you've become. Because the man you are now, the one who rushes home to read bedtime stories, who cries at his daughter's first steps, who loves openly and honestly, that's the man I fell in love with. And he's worth more than any business empire." Alessandro pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "How did I get so lucky?" "You didn't get lucky," Sophia teased. "You got stubborn. You refused to let me walk away after one night." Alessandro laughed, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Best decision of my life." Their conversation was interrupted by Isabella's cry over the baby monitor. Both parents moved simultaneously, a coordinated dance they'd perfected. They found their daughter standing in her crib, tears on her cheeks, reaching for them. "Mama. Dada." Alessandro scooped her up and Isabella immediately calmed, her small hand patting his face. "See?" Sophia said softly. "This is what matters. Not board meetings or expansion plans. This right here." Alessandro looked at his wife and daughter, at the family he'd never known he wanted, and felt something inside him settle. "You're right," he said. "This is everything." As Isabella grew into a toddler, her personality emerged. She was fearless like her father, curious like her mother, and had both of them wrapped around her tiny finger. Alessandro would cancel meetings to take her to the park, would sit through endless tea parties with stuffed animals, would let her paint his face with her art supplies. Sophia would watch them together and fall in love with Alessandro all over again. The way he looked at their daughter with such wonder and devotion never failed to make her heart swell. Elena's health continued to be stable, and she had become a constant presence in their lives. She would watch Isabella when Alessandro and Sophia needed time alone, would cook traditional meals that filled the house with the sense of Sophia's childhood, would offer wisdom when they struggled with parenting decisions. One evening, as they celebrated Isabella's second birthday, Sophia looked around at the life they'd built. The penthouse was full of people, friends they'd made together, family both blood and chosen, and at the center of it all was Alessandro, holding their daughter, his face lit with genuine happiness. "How does it feel?" Elena asked, appearing at Sophia's side. "To have everything you never knew you wanted?" Sophia smiled. "Like a miracle. Like every hard moment led to this." Her mother squeezed her hand. "That's because it did. Every struggle, every fear, every moment you thought you couldn't go on, they all brought you here. To this love, this family, this life." Later, after the guests had left and Isabella was asleep, Alessandro found Sophia on the terrace. She was looking out at the city, her expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" Alessandro asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how we started," Sophia said. "About that contract, that cold transaction that was supposed to be one night and nothing more. And look at us now. 2 years married, a beautiful daughter, a life I never imagined possible." Alessandro kissed her neck. "Do you ever regret it, signing that contract? Walking into my office that day?" Sophia turned in his arms. "Never. Not for a single second. Because it brought me you. It brought me this." She gestured to the penthouse behind them, to the life they'd built. Alessandro cupped her face in his hands. "I was so arrogant when we met. So sure I had everything figured out. I thought I could have an heir without the complications of love. I thought a contract could give me what I needed. But what I needed was you. All of you. The love, the complications, the mess, the beauty. I love you too," Sophia whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." They kissed under the Chicago stars, the city lights glittering around them like a promise. And inside the penthouse, their daughter slept peacefully, secure in the love of parents who had found each other against all odds. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most improbable circumstances: a desperate woman and a ruthless man. A contract that should have been cold and transactional, but became the foundation for something real and lasting. Alessandro and Sophia didn't find perfect love. They found complicated, messy, beautiful, real love. The kind that starts with fear and becomes courage. The kind that transforms transaction into devotion. The kind that proves that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we're most vulnerable, most desperate, most willing to take a risk. In the end, Alessandro didn't just get an heir. He got a family, a partner, a love that filled all the empty spaces he'd spent years pretending didn't exist. And Sophia didn't just save her mother's life. She found her own life, one filled with love and purpose and the kind of happiness that comes from being truly seen and cherished. Their story reminds us that love doesn't always arrive wrapped in pretty packages. Sometimes it arrives in moments of desperation, in contracts signed with shaking hands, in transactions that transform into something sacred. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to stay when every instinct says to run, to trust when fear whispers doubt, to love even when it terrifies us. Because that's when real magic happens. That's when contracts become covenants, when strangers become soulmates, when one night becomes forever. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, subscribe to the channel now. Leave a like if you believe in second chances and the power of authentic connection. Tell us in the comments about a moment when something that seemed wrong turned into something beautifully right. And if you found this story worth your time, consider clicking the Super Thanks button. Your support helps us continue creating stories that celebrate the complexity and beauty of love in all its forms. Remember, your presence here, your engagement, your willingness to invest time in these stories, it all makes a difference. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of unexpected love. 3 years into their marriage, Alessandro and Sofia stood on the balcony of their lake house, watching Isabella play in the garden with Elena. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the water, and everything felt peaceful in a way that once would have seemed impossible. Sofia was pregnant again, just beginning to show, and Alessandro couldn't keep his hands off her growing belly. "Another miracle," he would say, his voice full of wonder. "Another gift I don't deserve." "You deserve everything," Sofia would always reply. They had named this baby Lucas, after Alessandro's grandfather, the one man in his family who had shown him genuine kindness before he died. The pregnancy was easier this time, Sofia's body knowing what to expect, and Alessandro was somehow even more attentive than before. At night, he would talk to both children, Isabella pressing her ear to Sofia's stomach to listen to her baby brother. "Mama, when will Lucas come out to play?" Isabella would ask, her dark curls bouncing. "Soon, precious," Sofia would answer. Very soon. Alessandro had fully stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his company, appointing a CEO he trusted while maintaining his position as chairman. It gave him freedom to be present, to not miss the small moments that made up a life. He coached Isabella's soccer team, attended every school event for Sofia's students, and spent his evenings with his family rather than in boardrooms. The business world had adjusted, and surprisingly, the company thrived under Alessandro's more balanced leadership. He'd proven that success didn't require sacrifice of everything else, that you could build an empire and still go home to tuck your children into bed. On their 3rd anniversary, Alessandro took Sofia back to that cafe in Soho again, making it their tradition. The owner greeted them like old friends, already knowing their order. "You two give me hope," he said as he brought their coffee. "In a world full of transaction, you found transformation. That's rare." After he left, Sofia reached across the table to take Alessandro's hand. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I hadn't walked into your office that day?" "Every day," Alessandro admitted. "And it terrifies me. The idea that we almost didn't happen, that you could have found another way to save your mother, that I could have continued building my empire without ever knowing what I was missing. But we did happen," Sofia said firmly. "Against all odds, despite every reason it shouldn't have worked, we happened. And we keep happening, every day." Alessandro brought her hand to his lips. "I want to renew our vows." "What?" "Real vows this time, not the quick ceremony we had when you were pregnant. A celebration with everyone we love, with our children present, with words that reflect what we've built together." Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "When?" "This summer. At the lake house. Just family and close friends. Will you marry me again, Sofia? Will you stand with me and promise forever, not because of any contract or agreement, but just because we choose each other?" "Yes," Sofia whispered. 1,000 times yes. The vow renewal was everything their first wedding wasn't. Held in the garden of their lake house, with Isabella serving as flower girl and Sofia's mother holding baby Lucas. They spoke words they'd written themselves. Sofia went first, her voice clear and strong despite the tears. "Alessandro, when I walked into your office 3 years ago, I was broken and desperate. I thought I was signing away a piece of myself to save my mother. But what I actually did was find myself. You've shown me what it means to be loved completely, to be seen and valued for exactly who I am. You've given me a family, a purpose, a life beyond anything I imagined possible. I promise to love you not just today, but every day. Through the easy moments and the hard ones, through the celebrations and the struggles. I choose you, Alessandro. I will always choose you." Alessandro's turn came, and his voice was rough with emotion. Sophia, I built an empire before I met you. I had everything the world says a man should want. But I had nothing that mattered. You taught me that love isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength. You showed me that being vulnerable isn't a liability, it's a gift. You gave me a family, taught me how to be a father, how to be a partner, how to be human. I was a man who knew how to acquire things but not how to cherish them. You taught me the difference. I promise to spend every day proving that you can trust me with your heart. That you didn't make a mistake when you gave me a chance. I love you more than success, more than empire, more than anything in this world except our children. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They exchanged new rings, simple bands engraved with the coordinates of that cafe in Soho where their story began. And when they kissed, their children clapped, their family cheered, and everything felt complete. That night, after the celebration ended and their children were asleep, Alessandro and Sophia lay together under the stars. The lake was quiet, the world at peace. Tell me something, Sophia said softly. Anything. If you could go back to that day in your office, knowing everything you know now, would you change anything? Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he pulled her closer. No. Not a single moment. Because every choice, every mistake, every fear, they all led here. To you, to our children, to this life. I wouldn't risk changing any of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, Alessandro said firmly. They taught us how to fight for each other. How to choose love even when it's complicated. Sophia smiled against his chest. We did good, didn't we? We built something real. We built something forever, Alessandro agreed. And we're just getting started. As the years continued to pass, their love deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They faced challenges. Parenthood wasn't always easy. Balancing careers required constant negotiation, and life threw curveballs that tested them. But they faced everything together, their foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Isabella grew into a bright, confident child, who had her father's business mind and her mother's compassion. Lucas was gentle and artistic, content to spend hours drawing while his sister planned world domination. They were different but close, united by the security of parents who loved them unreservedly. Alessandro's relationship with his own past changed too. He established a foundation in his mother's name, funding cancer research and treatment for families who couldn't afford care. It was Sophia's idea, a way to transform his pain into purpose. Every family we help, she'd said, is another miracle, another life saved, another chance given. Sophia's teaching career flourished. She became principal of her school, transforming it into a model program that other districts studied. She never forgot where she came from, never lost touch with the desperation that had driven her to Alessandro's office. It made her better at her job, more compassionate, more determined to give every child a fighting chance. Elena lived to see both her grandchildren grow, her cancer remaining in remission year after year. She would often tell people that she'd been given a miracle, but what she told Sophia privately was different. I didn't just get more time, she would say. I got to watch you become who you were meant to be. That's the real gift. On Alessandro and Sophia's 5th anniversary, they found themselves back at that cafe in Soho once more, but this time, they brought Isabella and Lucas. The owner was delighted, immediately bringing out cookies for the children. Your parents, he told Isabella and Lucas as they munched on treats. They gave this old man faith and love again. Alessandro and Sophia watched their children, hands intertwined across the table. How did we get here? Sophia asked softly. To this moment? This life? One choice at a time, Alessandro replied. One moment of courage, one leap of faith. You walked through my door when you had every reason to turn back. I let down my walls when every instinct told me to keep them up. We chose each other over and over again. And I'd make every choice the same way. As the afternoon faded, and they prepared to leave, Isabella looked up at her parents with serious eyes. "Daddy, Mama," she said, "will you tell us how you met?" "Someday, when you're older," Sophia promised. "It's a complicated story." Alessandro caught Sophia's eye and smiled. "It's a love story," he corrected, "the best kind. The kind that starts impossible and becomes inevitable." They walked out of the cafe into the Chicago afternoon, a family of 4 now, complete and whole. And if you looked closely, you might have seen the ghost of 2 people from 5 years ago. A desperate woman with everything to lose, and a lonely man who didn't know what he was missing. You might have seen the moment their eyes met for the first time, the instant that changed everything. Because that's the magic of real love. It takes our most vulnerable moments, our most desperate hours, and transforms them into foundations for forever. Alessandro and Sophia's story wasn't about a contract or a transaction. It was about 2 wounded people finding the courage to stay when everything said to run, about building trust from fear, love from loneliness, family from fragments. In the end, Alessandro got his heir, and so much more. And Sophia saved her mother's life while finding her own. Sometimes the universe conspires to bring together the people who need each other most, even when the path seems impossible, even when the odds are stacked against them, even when it starts with the most unlikely circumstances. Their love reminds us that magic exists not in fairy tales, but in the everyday choice to show up, to be vulnerable, to trust even when trust seems foolish, that the greatest transformations happen not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of 1,000 small decisions to choose love over fear. So here's to the desperate choices that become beautiful lives, to the contracts that transform into covenants, to the one nights that become forevers, to love that starts impossible and becomes inevitable. If this story moved you, touched something in your heart, reminded you that real love still exists even in the most unexpected places, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of authentic connection and second chances. Share your own story of unexpected love in the comments below. And if you truly found value in this journey, if you want to support more stories like this, click that super thanks button. Your contribution helps us continue creating narratives that celebrate real love in all its messy, beautiful, transformative glory. Thank you for being here, for investing your time, for believing that stories matter. Until we meet again, remember that your love story is waiting. Maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not in the place you're looking, but it's coming. And when it arrives, have the courage to say yes. Have the bravery to stay. Have the faith to build something that lasts. Because you deserve a love story that transforms you. You deserve your own impossible becoming inevitable.